Hi there, and welcome to our final video about editing your essay. Now, in editing your essay, it might be really easy to first of all just focus on typos and grammar mistakes and things like that, but actually a really useful process is to edit in stages. So to actually edit for your argument first of all, then the structure, then the paragraphing, and then the expression. Because if you only focus on looking at the expression, first of all, or the paragraphing, for instance, you might be spending a lot of time reworking sentences, revising typos, but then decide that actually that whole paragraph needs to be cut out. So instead of wasting all that time, take it first of all from your argument. So when you're looking at editing for your argument, go back through the videos that we looked at in terms of introductions, thesis statements, paragraphing, and conclusions, and ask yourself things like, is your thesis statement clear in the introduction? Is it there in the conclusion? Does it clearly answer the question, and does it give your key reasons for your answer? Is it consistent in both the introduction and conclusion, or has the conclusion captured your argument even more clearly than your introduction? If that is the case, move your thesis statement up from your conclusion to your introduction, because your reader reads the introduction first. That makes the very first impression, and the clearer your thesis statement is in the introduction, the easier it is for them to read it. So go back through looking for your argument first of all. Then on another day, for instance, think about your structure. Think about, is your structure convincing? Does it take into account the counter-arguments? Does it give enough time to address those counter-arguments? Is your argument sustained throughout the essay? Is it clear how the different ideas fit together, for instance? And think about the logical order of your paragraphs. Have you set them up clearly? Then, on another day, think about your paragraphs in a bit more detail. Now for this, have a think about your paragraphs as individual units. Do they have individual topic sentences that clearly answer your question? So does the topic sentence have a main idea, and does it show your answer to the question? Also think about the length of your paragraphs. Does it have enough information, too much information? Is it fitting that 150 to 200 words guideline about how long paragraphs should be? Do you need to split them up? Do you need to add more evidence, and so on? And check about your citations. Are they correct? Is your evidence accurate? So make sure that you go through your paragraphing to check your academic integrity as well. Then edit for expression. So have a think about clarity and cohesion. So we're going to focus on this in the video. We're going to focus on some key strategies. In particular, looking at long sentences, which are one of the most common problems in writing up drafts of essays, and thinking about clarity and how to make clearer sentences by looking at cohesive devices. So let's have a look at clarity and cohesion. Now, in terms of clarity, always go back to thinking about the accuracy of your sentences. So think about an exercise like this. How can these statements be misinterpreted? The first one, I saw the tree coming around the hill. Now, of course, you would expect that your reader would think, okay, so the person in this sentence is moving around a hill, and they are seeing a tree on the top of the hill. But it could potentially be misinterpreted as the tree was walking around the hill, and the tree was coming around the hill towards them, which, while it might be unusual, it still can be misinterpreted in that way. And your aim with academic writing is to make sure that the complex ideas that you're explaining cannot be misinterpreted. This is a simple example, but it shows that the more complex your ideas get, the easier it is to misinterpret them. So you want to be careful about that. Here's another one. The man was throwing the stick with the dog. Now, you would expect that this sentence would be read as the man was throwing the stick to the dog, so playing fetch with the dog. But it could be misinterpreted by the phrasing to actually indicate that the dog and the stick were attached to each other, and the man was throwing both of them at the same time. Now, while that might sound ridiculous, it can be misinterpreted in that way. So you don't want to have any potential areas for misinterpretation in your own work. Now, thinking about a real example from an academic essay, here is one where there's quite a lot of information packed into this sentence, and it can be misinterpreted in various ways. It could be very unclear, for instance, in the first line as to who was referred to as her. Is that Matilda? Is that somebody else? Another person who's related to Henry? And so on. So when you have a sentence that lasts for more than 2 lines, really take a look at it very carefully and think about, can it be misinterpreted? Because this is one of the most common problems with writing up essays, is the long sentences. So what you want to do is try splitting up the sentences, divide them up into multiple ideas. Reduce the amount of adjectives or adverbs that you use. Ask yourself, is this word absolutely necessary to get my argument across? And if the sentence structure is what's contributing to a lack of clarity, try and reorder it. Try flipping it around the other way. So look, taking that previous sentence that we had before, you can actually revise it to turn it into quite a few sentences rather than just one. And this helps to clarify the information. So actually explaining, first of all, who was referred to as her, so Matilda, for instance. And take a look through that to get some more ideas for editing for clarity. Another key area that causes confusion is with the use of reference like it, this, that, and there. So these pronouns can particularly be confusing when they might refer to multiple things. So if you take a look at this sentence, I didn't know it when I submitted it, but they were never going to be happy with my paper. The peer reviewers uniformly panned it. They said it was unoriginal, lacked insight, and was poorly written. My supervisors had said otherwise. It was clear that they didn't know what they were talking about. So who is referred to as they in that last sentence? Is it the supervisors or is it the reviewers? In the first sentence, I didn't know it when I submitted it. Right from the very beginning, you could be a little bit confused. I didn't know what when I submitted what. It can be quite unclear, these pronouns. So what you want to do is keep thinking about, have I clearly stated which thing I'm referring to? So in Austin and Smith, you're reading for this week, you can see quite a few examples of a clear use of these kinds of pronouns. So in this example, each of these companies held a charter giving it exclusive rights. So the it there is the companies. The other example there is the attack on this position has largely come from students of, etc. So rather than saying the attack on this has largely come, they've said the attack on this position. They've clarified what they're referring to. The next thing to think about is cohesion in your writing, particularly in your paragraphs when you're presenting multiple pieces of evidence. Readers need to follow how the pieces of evidence help to make your argument, and cohesive devices can really help with this. So they can help to explain what's the order of your ideas. So in your introduction and in your conclusion, when you're talking about the order of your essay, when you're signposting the key reasons, you could use things like first, second, third, or you could say, I begin this essay by focusing on this topic. Next, I move on to this. Finally, I conclude by doing this. That can really help your reader to follow what is your essay going to look like. Showing the connections between your logic, why those ideas connect to one another, can also be very helpful. Another thing is to think about what kind of connection is there. Are you contrasting ideas or are you clarifying ideas? If you're contrasting ideas, make that really clear. If you're clarifying, if this is an example, for instance, of the previous idea that you had, make that clear too. And you can use these kinds of words to add information and to conclude your essay. So when you have a conclusion and you might think that the reader might be prepared for another paragraph, they might not be ready for the conclusion, have a think about using this kind of cohesive language to show that you're at the conclusion. So in your reading for this week, you see quite a few examples of these all throughout their essay. First, we attempt to define, during the 1700s, the East India Company also carried on, etc. So these kinds of cohesive devices help you to follow the ideas. So cohesive devices can help to bridge different ideas, and they can help to allow your reader to follow what's going to come next. They can be prepared for what's coming next. And it helps to transition between ideas, particularly if you're moving on to a very different idea. So when you're editing for expression, look for clarity and cohesion, and also for academic integrity, use the Turnitin practice site before you submit your essay. Use the practice site to get a sense of have you paraphrased effectively, and on the Turnitin practice site there are examples in the writing and referencing resources to help you. So finally, just remember, edit in stages. First of all, tackle the hard stuff, tackle the argument and the structure, then move on to the details to do with paragraphing and expression. And the other videos should help you out to look for what do you need to do to get a clear argument, a logical structure, very cohesive paragraphs, and this video has helped to explain how do you achieve cohesion and clarity in your expression. A reminder too that you can come and see us for your essay, so you could bring along a draft, an outline, and you can have a Zoom appointment where we will read your essay in advance and give you advice over Zoom, where you're able to ask questions, seek clarification, and so on. So the writing coaches are really great for you to go and see. Okay, so we used the reading for this week, and further, the annotations in that reading are going to help you to reflect on what does a well-written essay look like, and what are some of the tips and tricks for writing essays in history. Thanks everyone.